Great. So we're talking today about two broad categories of transport, meaning two broad categories of mechanisms that allow cells to move things from the inside to the outside, from the inside of the cell through the membrane to the outside of the cell. So two broad categories. And then we'll talk a little bit about the specific types. But as we mentioned yesterday, and as I recapped at the beginning of class today, in order for organisms to maintain homeostasis, they must be able to move different molecules across their membrane. So some molecules need to be in high concentration on the inside, other molecules need to be in high concentration on the outside. So the cell has to be able to balance all of these different concentrations by moving things from one side of the cell to the other across the membrane. Some of these molecules that we think about are sodium chloride, which is NaCl. That's just table salt. Okay. We've also got H2O, which is water. We've got C6H12O6, which is glucose. So all of these molecules, all of these compounds are in flux. They're moving across the membrane. The first broad category, the first of two broad categories that we'll talk about, is passive transport. So again, you should be writing down the things that are highlighted in yellow. And you should also write down, the title of the slide. So passive transport. This means molecules moving with the concentration gradient, meaning they move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So we say that this is passive transport because energy is not required here. It's almost like rolling down a hill. If you literally just lay down at the top of a hill, you cross your arms, eventually you're going to start rolling if the hill is steep enough. You don't need to use any energy to do that. And this is the same thing with how these molecules move with their concentration gradient. They move from high concentration to low concentration. Specifically, within this broader category of passive transport, we've got three different types of movement. We've got simple diffusion, we've got facilitated diffusion, and we have osmosis. So I'm going to give you all some time to write, but I want someone to volunteer to read the definition of simple diffusion. So in about 10 seconds, someone can go ahead and unmute themselves and read the definition
of molecules through the membrane without any help from channel proteins.
Thank you, Kyrie. And can you read the examples of that as well?
CO2, O2, nitrogen, and other small non-polar molecules.
Excellent. Thank you. So we'll give folks an opportunity to write that down. It may be a good idea to write down the examples as well, even though they are not highlighted. Can I have someone else volunteer to read facilitated diffusion? Kyrie did a great job. Can someone go ahead and do the second one, facilitated diffusion? Can someone please volunteer to read the definition of facilitated diffusion?
The movement of molecules through the membrane with the help
I
of
will.
a protein.
Was that Joseph? Joseph, you're a little quiet. Can you read that? And then Anthony, you can do the next one. But Joseph, you were a little quiet that time. Can you kind of get closer to your microphone, maybe?
Movement of molecules through the membrane with the help of a channel protein.
And can you read the examples as well?
Glucose, salt, and other larger polar molecules.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So facilitated diffusion is different than simple diffusion because facilitated diffusion needs help. It needs the help of a channel protein to move through the membrane. And then Brandon, can you go ahead and read, or not Brandon, Anthony, can you go ahead and read osmosis for us, please?
Yes, sir. Osmosis, movement of water through the membrane, requires an aquaporin.
Excellent, yeah. So that's an aquaporin. An aquaporin is a special type of channel protein that is used specifically for water. That is not necessarily something you need to know for this class, but it's just good to keep in mind that osmosis is specifically for water. So these are the three types of passive transport. I'm going to leave this on the screen for, let's call it 20 seconds to make sure that you at least have all of the highlighted words written down. Okay, moving on. So these animations really depict what happens in these two different types of passive transport. We don't have osmosis here. We will talk much more about osmosis tomorrow. In fact, the entire lesson tomorrow is about osmosis. But these other two types of passive transport, we've got simple diffusion on the left and facilitated diffusion on the right. Simple diffusion, as you can see, those molecules, they just simply move through the membrane by themselves. There is no tunnel, there's no channel protein that they move through. On the right, we should note that there's like this hamburger or hot dog bun shaped protein. That's actually a tunnel that is allowing the molecules to move through it. So facilitated diffusion requires that tunnel. We should also note that in both cases, the molecules are moving from the area of high concentration to the area of low concentration. That's what passive transport is all about. It doesn't require energy because I'm going from a place that's high to a place that's low. So I just roll down. It's much like rolling down a hill. Okay, it's easy. It doesn't require any energy to do that. The other broad category, as you may have guessed, is called active transport. And the biggest difference between passive and active transport is that active transport requires energy. It's like running up a hill. So again, please make sure that you're writing down at the very least the words that are highlighted in yellow here. So these molecules are actually moving against their concentration gradient. So instead of going from high to low, in active transport, they're going from low concentration to high concentration. And this is what requires energy. Go ahead and write down these examples of active transport. This won't come up too much in the course. You'll see it today in your activity for the day, but I'm going to go ahead and actually highlight these words for you. So go ahead and write down these types of active transport. We won't talk too specifically about any of them, but they are good to note. So all of these types of active transport require energy, and that energy comes in the form of ATP, which is something that we've talked about last week. Active transport requires energy, and so it's a little bit harder to do. It'd be like running up a hill or pushing a boulder up a hill. So in order to do that, it requires a lot of energy rather than just simply rolling down the hill. We're moving from low to high in the case of active transport. So we can also use this analogy. The doors open for Black Friday shopping. There's a huge crowd of people outside of the store. And as soon as those doors open, letting them in, they flood into the store where there is no one. So we're moving from an area of really, really crowded, high concentrated space into an area that is empty. It's low concentration. And so people at the front really don't even have to move that much because the crowd is pushing them. They're pushing them on into the inside. But if we try to go the opposite way, just imagine that you're trying to move from this area that is empty. It's a low concentration area through this hugely populated crowd that's very highly concentrated. There are a lot of people. It would take a lot of energy to do that. So this is a good analogy of active and passive transport. In this case, when you're trying to flow with the crowd, you're running into the store, that would be passive transport. They could almost carry you in. It doesn't require much energy. You see people are just getting shoved over and falling. Actually a pretty dangerous situation. On the other hand, active transport, if I were to try to move in the opposite direction of this crowd, it would take a lot of maneuvering, a lot of energy. I'm gonna have to shove and squeeze my way through huge crowds of people. All right, so let's look at this. So, Kyrie, I know you mentioned that you were still a little bit confused about concentration. Was that Kyrie? Somebody said something about concentration. I thought. Maybe not. But this question is kind of getting at concentration as well. We've got the inside of the cell here. We've got a cell membrane. It's kind of represented in this burnt orange color. And on the inside of the cell, we've got carbon dioxide and oxygen. And we also have carbon dioxide and oxygen on the outside of the cell. But we can see that their concentration is a little bit different. So can someone come off of mute and tell me where is the concentration of CO2? Where is the concentration of carbon dioxide higher? Is it higher on the inside or on the outside?
The inside.
The concentration of CO2
Oh, outside.
is much higher on the outside. I've got only 2 of these CO2 molecules on the inside of the cell, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them on the outside of the cell. So the concentration in this example is much higher on the outside of the cell than it is on the inside. What about for oxygen? Where is the concentration higher for oxygen, for O2?
Inside.
It's higher on the inside of the cell. Good. Thank you for the several people who answered. I appreciate you. So we want to know, based on what you just told me about oxygen, you all just told me that the concentration is higher on the inside of the cell. What direction is the oxygen going to move in order to achieve equilibrium? Remember, equilibrium is a balance. We want to have roughly the same amount on the inside as we do on the outside. So where does the oxygen need to move in order to achieve that balance? Does it need to move from the outside to the inside or from the inside to the outside?
The outside to the inside.
Okay, so let's just say I take this oxygen.
No, inside to outside.
Okay, it needs to move from the inside to the outside. Watch this. This oxygen now goes to the outside. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 oxygens on the inside, and 1, 2, 3, 4 oxygens on the outside. So we're not quite balanced, but we're almost there. If I take one more and put it out here, now again, I'm not quite balanced, but what's going to end up happening is that I can't ever be perfectly balanced. So one of them is going to end up constantly shifting from the outside to the inside. What about my carbon dioxide? What direction will the CO2 molecules need to move in order to achieve equilibrium? You all told me earlier that the CO2 is in a higher concentration on the outside. So what direction does it need to move?
What you mean?
Where will the CO2, where will the carbon dioxide flow? Will it flow to the inside of the cell to achieve equilibrium, or will it flow to the outside of the cell?
The inside, right?
And flow to the inside. Again, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 carbon dioxide molecules on the outside of the cell. And I've only got 1, 2 on the inside of the cell. So we're in a much higher concentration out here, which means that some of them are going to flow to the inside of the cell. Oops. Some of them will flow to the inside of the cell in order to achieve equilibrium. All right. Now, my last question, what kind of transport is this? What kind of transport is this? We talked about active and passive transport. What kind of transport is this? Any ideas? What kind of transport are we talking about here? Okay, keep in mind, we only have two general types. We've got active transport and we've got passive transport. Active transport requires energy. Passive transport does not require energy. And we're talking about energy in the form of ATP. So did you see ATP anywhere in any of these movements? Did we have any energy involved? Even when the oxygen was moving, there's no energy. So it has to be passive transport. We'll practice more with this, and your activity today will kind of walk you through more of these questions as well. All right, but that's the end of the lesson. We've got 20 minutes for the asynchronous portion of class. This is also a good opportunity for me to remind you all that you can schedule appointments with me. And I've had a couple of people do it so far. I think it would be a great idea for some of you to get some more one-on-one time to just walk through some of these concepts with me and make sure you fully understand them. So I'm going to send a link to the chat right now where you can schedule an appointment with me one-on-one. Okay, so over the next 20 minutes, you should be working on our exit ticket for the day, as well as the cellular transport practice activity. So you'll go into modules, you'll scroll down to Unit 4, and then you'll access the Unit 4 Day 4 exit ticket. So if you need any help, Anthony, I don't know if you'll have access to the Canvas class yet. So you'll just have to wait for now and don't worry about it right now. But if any of you have questions, I'll be here on mute while you knock out the asynchronous assignment.
What you want me to do?
Give me 1 second. Anthony, can you go to that link that I just sent to the chat and join me in that Google Meet so we can just talk? Anthony, can you click on that link that I just sent to the chat and join me in that other Google Meets?
So what do we need to do?
Okay, folks, it is
What do we need
1:20, so
to
you are good to
start
go.
trying to catch up to where
I hope you have a
we
good rest of your Wednesday.